Hi, welcome to this episode of Connecting Cowichan. I'm your host Joseph, and in today's episode we will be talking about cultural ceremonies. And before we jump into that topic, I wanted to recap and summarize the overall series of Connecting Cowichan, because it has been quite the journey, and getting to talk about the various topics within the Coast Salish culture with all of the people that we have with coming from all different walks of life. In episodes 1 and 2, we had Ruby Peter as our special guest for language as well as storytelling. And in episode 3, we had Coast Salish artist Herb Rice discuss the topic of carving. And we discussed that one quite in depth. And then in episode 4, we had Coast Salish knitter Robert Sam, and we discussed the overall state of knitting as well as some of the history behind knitting. And in episodes 5 and 6, we had Coast Salish weaver and cedar bark harvester Laura Elliott, and we discussed the different creations of weaving and some of the teachings behind weaving. And in episodes 7 and 8, we discussed fishing and smoking fish with Wayne Page Sr. And through all of that, we have had so many different conversations about the various topics within the Coast Salish culture and where each of those aspects of the culture are at currently. And we have heard reiterated time and time again the Coast Salish teachings, and that to be put into today's episode as well. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them so that we could talk about how those are practiced within cultural ceremony. And the topic of cultural ceremony itself is very broad, and it makes it very difficult to delve into such a broad topic. Now with today's episode, I wanted to break this down into several different areas that we can discuss. Because the topic of cultural ceremony is such a big and broad topic, and there are so many different types of ceremonies, I didn't want to delve into any one specific ceremony, because that could get into subject matter that is not necessarily to be shared outside of the Coast Salish community, because of the aspect of how sacred some of the practices are. So I have done my best to share as much as I can about cultural ceremony without touching on those sort of more sensitive subjects. And the subject we're going to be discussing today is primarily the cultural ceremony of potluck or potlatch. And say that how you will, just because within BC we have so many different dialects of language that you'll hear words that are the same, like they mean the same thing, but they're pronounced slightly different. And that's why with the terminologies, it's often like a family lineage for a lot of the cultural teachings, and it's just passed down through generation and generation. So these sort of So with a potluck or potlatch, so with a cult, I'm just going to call it a cultural ceremony just for the ease of terminology for this. For a cultural ceremony, you will often see members from the local community coming to the gathering, and sometimes you will see members from the extended community of the Coast Salish territory coming to the gatherings as well. Now that can vary quite a bit. It really depends on the type of ceremony. But with this type of ceremony, with this one's a tough one. It really depends on the ceremony that is being held, and the formatting of the ceremonies are typically very similar. The ceremonies are often structured in So let's just talk about how a cultural ceremony would come about. A family will often have a leader of their, a matriarch, if you will, who guides the cultural ceremonies within the family, and that person will often be the person who the remainder of the family will come to for cultural advice. And once it has been decided that there is enough interest in hosting a cultural ceremony, that's when the family will come together and meet. And it starts with the family. The family is the one who puts on the cultural work, and it can vary quite a bit in terms of how the cultural work comes together. So once enough interest has been garnered from the families, the elder of the family will call a family meeting. And that family meeting will just be the step one where they start discussing the various different aspects of the cultural work that needs to happen. And this can vary quite a bit, but one that stays consistent is the cooks. And this will vary by family, because within the families you can hire or hire, request, what have you. Because when you host a cultural work, you typically bring in helpers or workers, and this will depend on, I guess, family tradition. And from there, these workers that are brought in for the cultural ceremony will be a part of the work. And the other aspect to it is the community. The community also is a part of the work itself as well, because their presence is a big part of making that ceremony a success. And families will meet and have their initial meeting to discuss, I guess, the various aspects of it. So like date, time, what ceremony is going to be conducted. And once that that decision-making process has started, the family will then, I guess, disperse and start having the conversations with the members of the community that they are planning on hiring, or I guess having in as helpers. And it really depends on the type of ceremony that they are hosting, on what type of workers they will have, whether it's just a worker or a helper, and how big the actual ceremony is, because there's no no, I guess, parameters on the size for a potluck. And the ceremonies can look vastly different, and it very much depends on the type of ceremony that's being held. But they start off with the family, then they have the workers, and then they have the community. And all of this comes together to create a successful ceremony. And the first, I guess, teaching that I wanted to talk about, and really kind of delve into, and it is often referenced at a cultural ceremony. And even within our organizations, you often hear it. It's Natsamat Shkwalowin, which means one mind and one spirit. And this is woven into every great ceremony, carved into every layer that makes the ceremony sacred. And we've already touched on the three different parts of the community that it takes to make a great ceremony. And Natsamat Shkwalowin is just a teaching that the overall community knows and understands to come together and to help each other make it happen and be a success. And this is where the aspects of like coming together and working together really shine as at these cultural ceremonies, because everybody knows what needs to happen, and everybody who is in attendance is more than willing to help. And it takes a community to make a successful ceremony happen, and the community often comes together and will work as one to ensure that it happens. Say, for example, if a cultural ceremony is happening and there is word in community that there isn't enough food for the ceremony, another family from the community can step up and help by supplying, say, fish, for example, for the ceremony. And another family would step up and be the family cooking for the ceremony. So there's a lot of different factors in terms of hosting a successful ceremony. One thing that you hear reiterated time and time again is thank the cooks, because they work as one to ensure that everyone at the ceremony is fed, and they work hard to ensure that that can happen. The next aspect of the cultural ceremony is the community. Those who come to the ceremony to be a part and practice Natsamat Shkwalowin. Another teaching that is reiterated throughout is take only what you need, and a lesser known part of that is and give what you can. So that's why with this teaching of take only what you need, you'll hear it from elders, and then you'll find often that, and I find that often when we're talking about take only what you need, that can be, I guess, open to interpretation in some circumstances, just because for an individual like myself who is providing for, say, a family, for example, I would only take enough for my individual family. But if a ceremony is on the way, like in the near future, then taking more to give for that ceremony would be, I guess, the next aspect. I don't know how, kind of losing my train of thought on that one. So sometimes you end up taking more than what you need, which is kind of contradictory to the actual teaching, but it's for the purpose of giving back to the community. Or aspect of giving back to your community, that could be even just being present for the ceremony. And that one is often forgotten about, is just the being there, being present, being a part of the community is such a big role. And that part is often overlooked and, I guess, not discussed. Another prominent teaching that is reiterated throughout the series is gifting your first creation away, or gifting your first within that aspect of the culture away. So this is in talks about, like, this is a good example to use because it is woven deep within our culture, and there are so many examples throughout the series that we could point to of this teaching, because you hear it reiterated time and time again. And this was something that was taught to myself growing up, is that the first time you partake in ceremony, you give away what you have received for that ceremony. And that pertains to day-to-day life as well, because another example would be, say you make a spear and it's your first spear that you have made, and the teaching is that you give the first one away. And the reason for that is because if you've created it, you know how to do it, you can make another one for yourself. Same thing with carving. Carving, you give your first carving away. Hunting, you give your first catch away. Is another part that is reiterated time and time again throughout the whole of Coast Salish culture, is that if you create something and it's your first one, you give it away. We haven't really talked about what happens on the day of the ceremony, and that can vary a little bit from family to family. Typically, potluck ceremonies, when you think of a potluck, you think of food, and it really depends on the host family, on what you can expect, because each family has slightly different teachings and a lot of similar teachings. So you could see quite the variance in between. And what you'll typically see is that it'll start or finish with food. And there are a lot of different people involved in a ceremony, and it comes down to those three aspects again. And you'll see a wide variety of different things happening at a ceremony. And if you have the opportunity to go to one, I highly suggest that you take that opportunity, because you may see something that you may have never seen before, and there is often drumming and singing and dancing and food and giveaways from the host family. And when everything goes according to plan and we have not so much squallow, and you end up seeing a lot of people connecting in Cowichan. And it is always my favorite time to attend different ceremonies, to be able to see the rich culture that is in Cowichan. And as we've learned throughout the series, the culture is going through changes and it is evolving, and you see different parts of the culture evolving, you see different parts of the culture struggling, and they all intertwine to create what we call our culture. And you hear about language being revitalized, less and less fluent speakers, and you are seeing more, there are more people getting involved in the programs that are out there for the Hulkameetnam language. And you're seeing carving become less prominent in the territory. And knitting is one that we see all too often, our culture being used for others' gains. It's tough because there's so many aspects of culture, and it has to be maintained by our community to grow the different areas within the culture. And it takes time, and each aspect of our culture needs a champion to elevate that area within our culture. And right now, we see a lot of the champions for those aspects of culture are elders. And I think about the future of where the culture is heading, and as it sits right now, we need more and more people to pick up those areas of the culture and be the champion who is going to revitalize and rebuild and create a community around that aspect of the culture. That seems to be a large struggle, is finding youth who want to be involved in partaking in the different aspects of culture. Because with all of it intertwining and working together for our cultural ceremonies, if we lose the different aspects, then the culture is going to suffer over the long term. Our ceremonies will change. And they probably have. Because in terms of ceremony, we can talk about the history of ceremony and delve into the reason why certain things happen the way they do. And it does have to do with history, with our practices with ceremony, because it was a banned practice for my grandmother's generation and her parents' generation and even my parents' generation. There were a lot of aspects that were working against our culture. The impacts are largely seen today. I remain optimistic because we see the next generation starting to partake, and you see the glow that comes from that. There's an aspect of belonging that really needs to be emphasized, because our culture is all about belonging. Our culture is about being a community, being together, coming together, working as one, to be practiced by the community, to ensure that we're able to continue our cultural growth. I remain optimistic. Because of the history. Man, ceremony is such a massive topic to talk about. And within our community, it's even a touchy subject. So I hope that with this I have done my best to showcase our culture. And like I said, this has been a cultural revitalization project to appreciate the Cowichan culture. Cowichan, Coast Salish, we're all one big community, and more often than not, we're very intertwined in terms of being related. Gosh, the family trees, I think that's one that would be a very, very big one to jump into because of how big the families are. I have so many cousins, that aunties, uncles. I always found it very interesting in school talking about my family because I had so many cousins. But again, I hope I did a very good job in sharing the various parts of our culture. It has been a journey. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Connecting Cowichan. I've been your host, Joseph, and it's been an honor to walk through this whole process and learn, because I did learn a lot. I learned a lot about the different parts of my own culture, the different teachings that they practice within that. Has definitely filled my heart because has been a journey. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Connecting Cowichan. I've been your host, Joseph, and it's been an honor to walk through this whole process.